All right, I know we're all talking about AI, but we're going to talk about one of the most valuable skills out there that I think AI is never going to eliminate, and that is becoming a great public speaker, whether big stage, small stage. I've got one of the premier storytellers and public speaking coaches, Mike Ganino. Mike, say hi.
Hey, hey.
He's the author of a new book, Make a Scene Amazing. We're going to talk, I mean, really dive deep here into not just the importance of great storytelling, but why the myth of storytelling frameworks is wrong and it's actually holding back, how to create chemical triggers that make the story super powerful, the clues that will find your best stories, why you're probably testing your stories the complete wrong way, and how to fix it. We're going to talk about the Golden Globes and Nikki Glazer. We're going to talk about the best and worst award speeches and importantly, how to make numbers come alive. All this on the Garlic Marketing Show. And of course, one of the best stories to have is to collect your client stories. Go to videocasestory.com/finder, where we'll help you collect and find those perfect stories. All right, let's get started.
My name is Gino Wickman. I was introduced to Ian, and that's what brought me into this video world and got me embracing this video world. And Ian did exactly what I hoped. He got me really comfortable with putting videos out to the world and having a great strategy around putting videos out to the world, because there's so much more than just shooting a video. And so the way that he positions those videos, optimizes those videos, he's done a great job.
All right. Sure, Mike's, been on a few times, really a master at helping people be better public speakers, be entertainers, which I think it's gonna be, we didn't talk about this before the show, but I think, now that I'm thinking about it, it's probably going to be one of the most important things now with all the AI content going on out there, that being the best human possible at talking is probably going to be one of the most valuable skills, don't you think?
Yeah, it's one of those things that is, I don't think people think about this as something that requires the amount of like self-awareness and self-work and studying yourself as it does. But if you want to be great at this, you have to really be able to look and say, what's stopping me from connecting in this way? Why am I moving in this habitual, boring way on stage? Why am I struggling to have intimacy with an audience member? Why is all of that? And I think people are surprised sometimes that the answers to being a really dynamic public speaker, whether on a big stage or a small one, is breaking down this like fourth wall and connecting with people. And I think in a world of AI, that's what we're going to have left. Because at some point, AI will be really great at even writing the speech for you. Right now, they're kind of not so good. Like, I'll get them sometimes and I say, sweetie, I know that you pop this into ChatGPT. This is not good. It's not there. But it will get there. Like,
It will, yeah.
someone is going to dump in all of the top TED Talks, all the top political speeches, all the top award show speeches, all the top keynote speeches from YouTube and say, here's a perfect script. And then they'll be able to go look at someone's book or someone's life and say, ooh, here's some stories for you to tell. And when that happens, what's left? Us, our physical, meaty little body.
Well, that's why physical meat. It's true though. Because that's all that's gonna be left, and I'm really like looking at the future of it, and when you talk about this, and I think you glanced over it, but it's important to say, because we're thinking, I think when people think public speaking, a lot of times they think big stage from 20 to 20,000 people, but you talked about small stages, right? And how important that is. But describe what you mean by a small stage.
I think sometimes when we think of public speaking, we think of, Mel Robbins or my friend Laura Gassner-Otting doing these big arenas and things like that. But the reality is, being able to communicate your ideas in front of people is, I think, one of the greatest assets someone can have. So let's say, for example, that you are a social media expert for real estate agents. It'd be pretty dang useful for you to be able to go to the offices in your town and give a presentation and to make people at the end say, whoa, I can't wait to throw cash at this person to work with them because they were so dynamic. They were so good. They made it so easy. If you're somebody who is a financial planner, a lot of my clients have been financial planners who do, little small workshops, or they go out and they talk to people in small groups, even like 5 people, 3 people, or they go to an office. Like, I remember back when I used to work in HR, we would have the person from Schwab come in 3 times a year and pitch their stuff to the team. If you are really great at that, your chances of increasing your business, increasing your clients, increasing your revenue is much higher. And so if you're out there and you're thinking, public speaking is maybe someday I'll do a big speech when something happens to me. And I think, but there's so much influence and revenue and impact to be made in small rooms all over the places, going on podcasts and being really great, going on YouTube, doing webinars and being the person someone watches and they say, ooh, whatever he says, I'm in. I'll buy it.
Yeah.
That's power.
It is power. Well, and, you know, even beyond money, like influence too, right? If you want to influence people, I've seen so many times like leaders get up and people get up and attorneys get up and they say smart stuff, but it just doesn't come across as smart.
Yeah. Yeah. Or it starts to just get boring, or going back to AI, it's something I can find in 2 seconds on my phone. I can go search in my phone and ask AI, here's my situation. This literally is something you could do. Here's my financial situation. Here's my goals. Here's how old I am. Here's how much money I make. What kinds of plans should I be looking at? How should I be investing? I can go get all that. I could go put in all of these legal things and say, can you please help me understand what my risk is here? So if I can get all that in seconds or from someone's prompt, you know, they sell a $100 prompt book on legal issues. Somebody probably has that.
Yeah.
Then why do I need you and why would I trust you? It's going to be because of our relationship. And being in front of people, talking to them is just one of the most impactful ways to get that relationship you need.
And you know, the thing is, I feel like for so much of this, people feel it's generalities, right? And it's like we're talking relationship and impact and all of that. But can you tell me, like, describe the differences you've seen, especially like maybe someone you've worked with, the difference in their impact before concentrating on this and after?
Yeah, one of the great ways to look at that always is, one, they've been asked back, whether that's a big stage and you're speaking to the Society of HR Professionals and they ask you to come back to their next meeting next year or something, or people in the room doing what you want them to do. And so that may be that they've joined your email list, they've downloaded an audio training that you have for free, that they change, they actually go out and act like the leader you want. So when I think about some of the people I've worked with, Tiffany Lanier, she's over there in Florida too. She is someone I've worked with for 4 years, and she has this concept around that we have to own our shift, that all the stuff that's coming at us, all the change that's always going to be here, is a catalyst. So if you take all that just on the surface, it sounds like another, like, okay, this is an Instagram quote. So what we've worked on together over the years, and now she's out there, she just was in San Francisco speaking to like the all of California Head Start, so big conference. What we really pushed into were what were the specific stories and examples she has that the audience, once they hear it, they can't unhear it. So that they actually change, because it's not just information about, hey, change is happening, change is always going to happen, we live in unprecedented times, more than ever, all of those generalities that anyone could say. How can Tiffany leverage stories? So her stories of, there was one point where there was a story of her with her pregnancy and the difficulties there and what she hoped it would be versus what happened and the journey there. There's another really simple, fun one that she wrote. It's in the book, actually, about chilaquiles. You know, that like a Mexican dish of like chips and eggs and sauce, and her favorite place, like not having it anymore, and how in that moment she was like wanting to have a tantrum. And why do we get like that? I hear all the time from her. I just heard from her this week in San Francisco. She got off stage. Audiences, members coming back and saying, oh my gosh, the story about the chilaquiles, I don't have that, but last week my kid moved my water bottle and I almost lost my mind. Oh my God, you get me. I understand. I want to do what you're asking us to do. That's the kind of impact we can have.
I love, because you focus a lot in the book, make a scene, and by the way, folks, if you don't have the book, get it, but also it's beautiful. I think it's a nice piece of art.
Thank you.
But you talk a lot about, and I talk about a lot about storytelling, but also about the science of storytelling and making these stories and figuring out these stories that people will remember, and can't unhear. I love that fact. Can't unhear. I love the way you're saying that, because when we all think in stories, but it's amazing to me how much people discount it. Why do you think, first of all, why do you think people discount stories and the word story so much?
I think it's because we've had so much lessons around we need to tell stories, the science of stories. So we tried to tell a story, we got a framework, and then it didn't work. And it's like, well, thought it was supposed to work. I thought it was always supposed to work. And the reality is all of those frameworks, all of those models are missing what really works with storytelling. So I think people have tried it based on the stuff that's out there, and then it didn't land. And so, okay, well, maybe it doesn't work for everybody. I think sometimes we look at it and we think, especially because, everyone was so gung-ho around the hero's journey. So, we need a hero's journey. That's a lot of brain power to be thinking about, like some story about what happened when you ordered chilaquiles and how to put it into this hero's journey story. And you're like, I'm in the dark cave of my dark night trying to find a guide. What's going on? We make it so difficult that I think people say, I ain't got time for that, versus really looking at what we're trying to do with storytelling and then understanding a couple of little levers we can pull, that we don't need these big epic stories, that we could tell a simple story about last week and use it as a metaphor for the situation we want our audience to find themselves in.
Yes. And so when you're doing that, obviously people like frameworks and mechanisms. Is it a framework and a mechanism, or is it just practice?
Yes, both. The issue with the framework thing is that the frameworks we've been told are so basic, of like a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's like, okay, well, so does a bagel, but it didn't make it a great bagel. Like anything has a beginning, middle, and end. If I get up and leave the auditorium or close the YouTube video, like there's always a beginning, middle, and end. So how is that helpful? So we hear frameworks like that, and then we hear other frameworks which are like, we need the exposition, and then we need conflict and the inciting incident, and then we need a climax, and it's like by the end of this, it's like, what are we doing? It's like we're starting an OnlyFans season or something. Like we're climaxing an incident. Like it gets so hard because those frameworks alone are not what triggers human emotion. They can be helpful as starting points. But what we need to understand is that the listenability to a story, whether someone is going to stay tuned in, is 100% driven by dopamine. Dopamine is triggering the anticipation of reward. So when an audience member is listening, it's constantly having them have this anticipation of reward moment. Like, ooh, I think I know what's going to happen. Or I can't wait to see what happens next. Why was he standing in the hallway with a towel on in front of all of his employees? I got to hear this story. You see this in television all the time. Like, think about Law and Order SVU. The whole time, all they're doing is hijacking your dopamine to get you through the full episode, right? So they can tell a story and sell advertising because they sell more ads if you watch the whole dang thing. So we get stuck in these frameworks of, I need a beginning, a middle, an end. I need to have a journey and an arc and a hero's pathway. And we forget all these little things we can put in to trigger dopamine. We forget that if we're telling the story on a stage, on a podcast, on a video, in front of a room, presenting something, that our physicality changes the story. That how we use our voice, how we use our body changes what the audience takes away. And at the end of the day, a framework is a great place to start. It's a horrible place to finish.
And when you do VIP days with, everyone from amazing speakers to, business leaders, when they come in, most of these people are decent storytellers. Is that body presence usually the big issue that you need to work on? What is the most common thing that, like, people who are good at storytelling need to overcome to become great?
I would say most people are not good at storytelling for the stage. Maybe they figured out storytelling for copywriting or for, a book. But the actual elements of telling stories in front of people, again, whether on video or boardroom or big stage, is really different. And so, this whole idea from storytelling that we might have learned, creative writing, of like, be descriptive. Show, don't tell. You've all heard that. Show, don't tell. Mm-hmm. What happens a lot is someone is like, I remember standing in my mom's living room. The couch was covered with plastic. There were 4 candles on the back wall. The walls were white, uncomfortable, but none of that is really helpful in a spoken story, because all that's doing is making the audience have to remember a bunch of stuff that may not be useful. Mm. It is useful possibly in a book where I can stop and I could think about your room for a moment and say, oh, I see the room in my eye. But if none of those things are critical for us to understand as an audience member when we're listening to you, then it's all extra work for our brain, which becomes taxing. So we stop listening because we say, I don't know what room he was in and what was going on with the couch. When is he going to tell us about the couch? And the couch had no meaning. So I think often my advice to people, which is the name of the book, Make a Scene, is we need to start the story in the scene with action, with something happening. A lot of times we start with a lot of backstory. I think it's in that beginning, middle, and end advice that we've been given makes us say, well, I'll start at the beginning. I had an office downtown, and my office was very tall and very large and on the 5th floor. And it's like, how long until something happens? Versus I'm sitting in the chair in the boardroom, my knees shaking as I see her walk in. Boom. Now you got me. Who is she? Why is his knee shaking? Is it his boardroom? We want the audience doing that, not saying, oh, sounds like he had a nice office.
Yeah. When you are figuring, when you're doing this for yourself, are you constantly collecting stories?
So I tend to think in stories a lot. Like I'll think about situations that are happening to me and saying, oh, how could I use this? And I mean, I have them in like my notes app, like lists of random things. When you look at my notes app, you're like, what is this? Bird flew by and the lady got scared. Sometimes I have no idea. I look at that. I say, I don't know what I was watching that day, but okay. So I've gotten better at like putting a little more detail because it's just the most random list of like things happening.
I got those everywhere.
Yeah. It's like, well, this sounds fun. I don't know what it is. So for me, it's one, recognizing story is when something changes. So not everything is a story. Some things are just anecdotes, little things that happened. But stories are ultimately about the end state of the beginning, say something changed. You learned something, you figured out something, you broke something, you changed. Something changed. So that's my first clue. As I start to have things happen around me or to me, I say, ooh, interesting. I didn't used to think that way. Or I walked in here not thinking this is what was going to happen. Those are my first clues that a story might be emerging. And then I test them. One of the things a lot of people do is they test stuff in way too high stakes situations. So the first time they tell a story is when they're in front of, the whole real estate office where they really want to sell their Instagram coaching business. But they've never actually told the story anyway. Or they get on a big stage and they've been rehearsing in the mirror of a hotel by themselves. And they've never actually been in a relationship with an audience before telling that story. And so after I start to gather little notes in my head and in my notes app of, oh, I think this could be something, I start to say to myself, this is a good cue for everyone to write down, how did I start and how did I end? A good way to think about this is fill in the blank. I used to be someone who believed XYZ. Now I'm someone who believes ABC. Here's how that happened. Now, you wouldn't tell the story using those fill in the blanks, but it helps you understand if it's a story or just an interesting thing that happened. So I'm always looking for that. And then I'm testing it on podcasts, where it's low stakes. I could test out a story at a podcast, my own or someone else's.
Come on, this is a high stakes podcast here, buddy.
This is. I got this one down. Okay, this is my 50th one, and we're gonna get it. My 50th one of this book cycle, and so I tested on podcasts. I tested on social media. I tested in like a workshop. Like, let's say that I had a full day workshop. I have a little more room to try new stuff out than I do in an hour-long keynote or a 30-minute presentation or a 12-minute TED Talk. So I'm getting all of that, feeling it in my body, what worked, what didn't, where was the joke, what was too long, way before I'm ever actually trying it out with anybody. So that's kind of my working on a story process.
I'd love that, because I always come back to, the best storytellers are pretty much stand-up comedians, right? Because they have to constantly be telling new stories, and that's what they do. Even like, Jerry Seinfeld will pop into like a little place, and you'll see, because they want to test it out in small audiences, get that feedback. And I think that's such amazing, valuable advice, because it's almost, and like, it's really tough these days to test out stories. And you're like, well, on social media, I'm going to test a story out. I'm like, well, do you really get a response? Maybe people liked it. Maybe they didn't. I think that's a powerful thing to do. But, I want to shift it a little bit, because just for my own selfish information, you were talking about award shows, and Mike's going to go around and talk about, award shows. It's award show season, and the talks that they give. Obviously, they don't have time to really test those stories, because they kind of have to be live, but it's super high stakes. Because you screw that up, or like I did see your post on like Nikki Glaser, which was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And then, we've seen those ones where like, oh my God, this is horrible. And you're like, I feel really bad for this person. How does someone prepare for that and make it great? And, because that just seems so intimidating, especially the audience.
Right. And then the world watching it
Yeah.
online forever and posting about it, and people like me going on the news and yapping about it after. So a couple things. With Nikki Glaser, she was the host of the Golden Globes this year, and she nailed it. She has been, I think in a Howard Stern interview, she talked about how she tested the material like 93 times. Like what you were just saying about Jerry Seinfeld testing bits at small clubs. She would do that. Like, she was in Chicago at the Chicago Theater doing her big show, right, that people paid money for. But she would stop over at the small comedy club and test out some of the material she was going to use for the Golden Globes. And she said that the final things that we heard in the show, she had run at least 90 times.
Wow.
90 times to see what works, what doesn't work, what's too far, what didn't. And she got notes from like her assistant, who was like, I don't think that joke's funny. I don't think people are going to get it. I think you're going to lose people. And she was like, got it, scrap, done. Let's find a new one. So there's that element to what seemed live and off the cuff, but obviously it wasn't, it was intentional, right? Not accidental. And then on the other side, the people receiving the awards who are going to go up, I think there's twofold. One is they know they're nominated. So there's a chance, there's a 1 in 5 or a 1 in 8 chance, depending on the category, that they could win. So they, in my thing, it's like, put a couple things on a note of paper to show that this is important to you. When we look at the ones that really land, it's the ones that go up there and they don't just do a long thank you list. Like, oh, thank you to this person, thank you to this person. Those are boring and nobody cares. No one talks about those the next day. It's the people who give us context, right? This year, Jesse Eisenberg, he was nominated for writing and directing a movie called A Real Pain with Kieran Culkin. So you're seeing Kieran Culkin all over the news. It's from that movie. Well, he won the Independent Spirit Award recently for the movie. And he got up there, and instead of just thanking everyone, thank you to my producer, Emma Stone is one of the producers, the actress. Thank you to this one. He said, years ago, I did a movie with Emma Stone before either one of us anybody knew. My career's been fine. Hers blew up. But she always stayed in touch. And I used to write things online, and she would send me text messages and say, oh, this line was so funny. This bit was so good. I loved what you said here. He's like, my mom didn't even do that. She did that over and over and over. She kept looking out for me, even though her star was huge. Like, she's in huge movies. She kept looking out for me. And when I gave her this script, she said, I want to help you and I want to produce this. That is so much better than him just saying, Thanks to Emma Stone for producing the movie. He gave us context to the win. Demi Moore, when she has been winning on the cycle for her movie The Substance, she is not just saying, thank you to the Academy, thank you so-and-so. She's using it to talk about ageism against women in Hollywood. She talked about how way back in the 70s and 80s when she started, someone told her all she was ever going to be was a popcorn star, which is like a performer who you're just there to fill seats. You don't do good movies, you do fun movies. And she gave us context, and that has really given her a lot of momentum in this season. So in those moments where we have a chance to share a bunch of information or give a bunch of thank yous, we could borrow from some of these bigger award show speeches and say, can I put the information into context for everybody? And I find sometimes that is a helpful way if someone thinks I don't have a story. Great, then don't worry about a story right now. Can you give us context to this information, to this data, to the changes that are happening in social media or the financial thing? Give us context. Another way that I ask people is, how do you know what you know? You're over here telling me that the right way to do marketing is ABC. Prove it. Show me. Where'd you learn that? And sometimes we find our way to the story that way, in a sneaky way.
I love that. I love that. And, you mentioned something there, and I'm going to go off the awards topic because I want to come back to it, but just making the numbers come alive. And you talk about that in the book. And because I see that so much, especially in the business world, where people get up and just talk numbers. I'm like, no one thinks in numbers. If you're like, we had 47% growth, that might have been awesome growth. I have no way. I mean, I was a math major and I can't conceptualize that.
Right.
Most people, that are your business leaders are, dyslexic. So it's, how do you make those numbers come alive? Is it that context?
It is the context. And it's thinking, what is a way to describe this that someone can see? So for example, let's say that there's the if I was giving a talk here in LA and I knew it was to a bunch of Angelinos and I wanted them to understand 500,000 people, I might say, so, last year Taylor Swift sold out the SoFi Stadium in her Eras tour for 5 nights in a row. Every single night there was 80,000 people in that arena watching her. For those 5 nights, over those 5 nights, she saw 450,000 people come through. Imagine that many people listening to your podcast. That is what is happening for people when they adopt our podcast to the masses program. 5 times the Staples or the SoFi Center stacked on top of each other. That level of influence, the same level of influence as Taylor Swift. Let's work together. So something like that. Giving them something visual, giving them something that isn't just the number on its own, but imagine all of the children in the United States. That is the amount of kids every day that go to bed hungry in India. Whoa. Yes. That's so much more meaningful than, 700,000. And we used to have to think about this a lot when I was the exec producer at TEDx Cambridge, because we'd have all these scientists who were talking about research from MIT and Harvard. And it was like, we have to give people context, because the numbers alone don't mean anything until I understand what they actually mean. I always think, I had a chief financial officer way back when I was in the restaurant industry, and he said, numbers are stories. Numbers are stories. We need to understand how to tell the stories. And I've never forgotten that. Really great advice.
It is such great advice. Such great advice. And so in conclusion, I'm going to put you on the spot. What was the worst award show speech that you saw?
Oh my gosh. That one, it's so hard because I don't remember them, right? Like I don't even remember those bad ones because they're just, I don't know. I think one of the worst moments in award show moments at all is when Kanye West interrupted Taylor Swift 17 years ago at the Video Music Awards to say that Beyonce should have won the award. And then what I loved about that, the save there, because that's like the classic moment we all know when Kanye went up and said Taylor didn't deserve the award, Beyonce did. Later in the night, Beyonce won an award, and she brought Taylor up and said, give your speech. And Beyonce's older than Taylor Swift. She had been around longer. And she said, come up here, have your moment, and stood there and cheered for her. That to me was a great moment of, I think, a really horrible moment. what Kanye did was very like self-centered and selfish. It wasn't about lifting up Beyonce. It was his own thing.
Yeah.
And then what Beyonce did to fix his wrong, to highlight Taylor's win, I think is what we saw it all happen in one evening. Like horrible moment down to something really beautiful.
Yes, that is amazing. That's such a good point. And, and just fixing it and being there and being present and being a great entertainer, but a great presenter. And that comes from her skill set, right? Of just understanding the moment, Beyonce's.
Yeah. And being confident enough from her own previous experiences to know, I can do this. I'm going to be able to handle this. Whatever goes on, this is what I'm doing. And I think also probably being a good person. Like that probably was just on her heart, that it really bothered her that she was somehow involved in Taylor Swift being treated that way. And I think it probably wasn't in Beyonce's heart to be that person. So I think it's a mixture of who she is and then also all of the repetitions she's had in front of live audiences and knowing that she could handle whatever happened there.
I love that. Awesome. Well, Mr. Mike Ganino, Make a Scene is the book. He's on Instagram. Make sure to follow him there. Does a little on LinkedIn. We'll put links to all that in the show notes. And if you want to work with him, he does do VIP days with execs and top-level coaches and consultants and speakers. Mike, thanks so much for being on the Garlic Marketing Show.
Thanks for having me back.
And thank you all for making Mike and I a part of your story. This has been Iron Garlic and the Garlic Marketing Show.